Alright, g'day everyone, and welcome to something a bit different. A lot of you will know that I hang out a lot on the Althea's Dominions 5 server, and we talk about a whole bunch of stuff on there, and also on General Confusion's Discord channel. And at one point I got the question, which I've also gotten on YouTube actually, do I play anything other than Dominions? The answer is yes, obviously. And after some poking and prodding, a few people suggested that, hey, why don't you show off some HOI4? Which is Hearts of Iron 4 for those of you who aren't familiar with it, which is normally a World War II strategy game by Paradox Interactive. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea, but there's a lot of people who already put up that content now. But there's one of the great things about Hearts of Iron 4 is that it has some really good modding. The king of HOI4 mods is still, in my opinion, Kaiserreich, which is the hypothetical universe in which Germany won the First World War, and you find yourself in the 1930s with a strong imperial Germany, a communist France, America that's on the brink of bankruptcy and social decline, all sorts of interesting things. Such an interesting setting that we actually held a crisis competition in that setting in real life for a bunch of post-grads and cadets and whatnot some years ago, which was very, very interesting. But we're not playing that today. We're playing what I think is probably the second greatest mod that's been produced for Hearts of Iron 4, which is the Fallout mod, Old World Blues, which has recently been updated to include slices of Mexico. So I thought, as an introduction to the mod, as an introduction to some of the other stuff I play, let me take you through, introduce you to the mod, introduce you to some of the nations, the mechanics, for those of you that are a little more or less familiar. This video will probably be more useful if you're somewhat familiar with HOI4, because you can identify more of the differences in the mod. I'm also playing this because I enjoy writing as well as doing videos, and I was like, if I'm going to be doing a new writing project, which I currently am, I'm not sure how long I'll stick with it, but it's for this nation here, the Republic of the Rio Grande, which I'll link to that. I figured I may as well do a video introducing them as well, just to show the mod. So let's go into the country selection menu so you can see instantly what this mod has done to Hearts of Iron 4. This is a map of the Americas, so North America and a fraction of South America, peeking up the bottom there. That is the size of the ordinary HOI4 map, pretty much. At the moment, the modders have only really focused on the west coast and west central United States. A lot of the games, so Fallout 3, Fallout 4, are set on the east coast. Fallout 1 and 2 was set on the west coast. Fallout Tactics was set in, I believe, the Midwestern Brotherhood, which is up there somewhere. Well, they're actually spread around. They have airships, and there's also Brotherhood presence in Texas. And what they've done is they've revamped the entire map to be focused on the United States, and they've set the time a little bit before Fallout New Vegas. And they have painstakingly recreated both the known canon nations, so the New California Republic, Caesar's Legion, Arroyo's there, the Brotherhood of Steel, still present in the West. And if you zoom in, you've got New Vegas, you've got the Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel, the Great Khans, etc. So lots of well-known factions, and they've added to it using snippets of extrapolation from the Caesar's Legion lore in some cases, their own nations in others. Broken Coast is an entirely unique invention to them. In other cases, it's cut content, so the Washington Brotherhood, I believe, draws on some of the Van Buren material, I believe. Don't quote me on that, which was the cancelled game that didn't become Fallout 3. It would have been Fallout 3 if it was released, but it never got released. In the most recent update, what they've done is they've added this very interesting Mexico down the bottom. And I really enjoy playing in Mexico. I think it's got an interesting story. It fits well into the existing Fallout lore while being basically a fan creation that draws on known things about the lore and then fills in a lot of the gaps. So the setup in Mexico is that before the Great War, Mexico, unlike Canada, wasn't annexed by the United States. Mexico was just occupied by the United States. The United States was one of the remaining superpowers that was engaged in a desperate conflict for resources, which put them in direct rivalry with China. By this point, the European Commonwealth had suffered badly. The Europeans had apparently gone to war with the Middle East. There had been nuclear exchanges involved, but not the Great War as of yet. And America was hurting for resources. One of the things that America did secure was oil resources in Mexico. And to do that, they moved their troops in and secured a lot of the sites by force, and then extracted those resources north. And what you can see down here, Petro Chico, is actually the tribal remainder that set up around one of the major refinery complexes in Mexico. And they have some remembrance of the old corporate structures, and the corporate regs and titles have made their way into tribal myth instead of actual memory. So, for example, the leader takes the title of El CEO, so CEO. And they have prophecies around the coming of the next fiscal quarter, which will apparently bring judgment upon them from the shareholders in the sky. But the bulk of Mexico is controlled or dominated or occupied by a couple of different powers. The first is the Republic of the Rio Grande up here in the north. The Republic of the Rio Grande was created or recognized as an independent country by the United States as a way to essentially set up a puppet government which would allow them to occupy without occupying a significant chunk of Mexico. So the Republic of Rio Grande, because we'll be playing them, we don't have to cover their law here, but there were some survivors, and they had built up, and they, like the New California Republic, are a flawed democracy with problems from powerful, influential people inside that take away from the overall democratic nature of the Republic. Further to the south, the most important power in Mexico is Tlalocan. So Tlalocan is unique, well, not unique, it's rare in that it's ruled by an AI. So the idea here is there is one of the gifts that was provided to help make the occupation of Mexico easier was an experimental artificial intelligence, and Fallout has several of these, the ZAX series supercomputers. One of them was installed in a lair, or a base, in what is now Tlalocan. And that AI was charged with protecting the resources and assets of its defined operational area, and particularly Petro Chico's employees. Now, when there was a nuclear exchange and government collapsed, it activated and obviously survived the exchange and deployed a mixture of robots. It had a nuclear arsenal, and still does in the game have a nuclear arsenal. And significant automated underground factory complexes, established order over its defined operating territory, and then basically so protected the people in the place as best as it could. But because it's not creative and doesn't have a directive to advance, it's actually also suffocating at the same time. So it's hard for people in this area to advance because they're under this robot overlord who just sort of keeps things the way they are. And they're sort of kept under the thumb. So very, very powerful nation, no one wants to fight them early on. And they actually guarantee some of the surrounding nations that are good guys. So they guarantee the Republic of the Rio, Ejército Mexicano. My pronunciation is going to be terrible, so I don't hear an Aussie pronounce Spanish. It's just not going to work for you, but I'll try, okay? And they're powerful, you don't mess with them. The problem is they're suffering from, memory loss. So, the databanks that maintain Tlaloc are starting to break down after 200 years since the war, and as a result, this AI is eventually going to collapse. It's going to destabilize and collapse, which will ruin the political stability of Mexico and throw everything into chaos. But until that point, they are by far and away probably the most powerful nation on the map. They certainly rival the New California Republic and Caesar's Legion, if for no other reason than they start with lots and lots of robots and nukes. They've already... a fragment has already come off Tlaloc, which is one of his sons, in inverted commas, so a programming fragment, who takes the personality of Santa Anna, who is famous for being the guy who Sam Houston eventually defeated after Santa Anna had taken the Alamo. He eventually fought the Army of Texas, and Sam Houston was defeated. he leads this very militarized, aggressive fragment over here where he thinks he's restoring order to Mexico, and he calls his territory the Mexican army. And basically, the human population in these areas are treated very poorly and basically forced to work, and taxes and value are extracted in order to support the automated manufacturing complexes that are still in place, few though they are, which are enough to maintain a significant army. Santa Anna is much weaker than Tlaloc at the start of the game, but can become very, very deadly. Interesting person to play because you see the growth in the AI personality as his father starts to slowly break down. There's actually the stages of grief are modelled through national focuses in the game. That covers a lot of the setting. Obviously, Caesar's Legion is up there as your major threat to the north. You've got some independent colonist nations up here, Pecos and Bordelio, sorry. Then you've got a generic nation of undesirables here. The stronger undesirables are the Sinaloa cartel. So the cartels actually survived the Great War, which is impressive and problematic. And you've got free fighters. Free fighters are an interesting nation that where the elite actually take inspiration from the old luchador. Fallout's weird, man. Fallout's weird. But yeah, it's a nation of luchadors over here. Obviously, they don't fight in wrestling masks. They fight with guns like everyone else. But their culture revolves around the ring. So, let's jump into place in Republic of the Rio Grande. I'll cover the setup and we'll do some backstory. And then I'll jump through how I like opening as the Republic of Rio, just as an example of how the game plays. And we'll see how far we get. Okay, so here we are. We've loaded into the Republic of Rio. Instantly, there's a whole bunch of things we can do. I'll talk through the basic concepts of what I need to do. Then I'll do all the boring work in the background and we'll come back again once it's done. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with HOI4, the basic premise of the game is that you have military units that you control, and you also manage research and economy, recruiting new units, diplomacy, etc., with the ultimate goal of achieving, well, that's unique to your nation, right? But your goals are ultimately your own. But at the end of the day, usually it involves at least some conquest. Now, in an ordinary game of HOI4, an individual unit would be a division, and it would be made up of, depending on your country, anywhere from, say, 6,000 to 14,000 men at game start. In Fallout, obviously, we're in the post-war world, so if you look at what they're made up of, instead of being made up of infantry battalions, these are made up of infantry platoons, for want of a better word. There are 25 men in each of these units, and you can adjust the template to design the unit however you want. And this unit currently has 125 men, and of those 125 men, 63 have guns, and everyone else has, well, nothing. They are using their fists, which is unfortunate for them, but 63 of them have basic 5.56mm bolt-action rifles, which is the basic weaponry tier. So your manpower is usually in Fallout tiny. Rio, however, and some of the Mexican nations, by virtue of some of the story decisions you'll see, and they're weaker than the Legion and NCR, but similar in the sense that they actually have quite a large population. So there's 375,000 people living in the Republic of the Rio Grande, which, if you compare it to some of the smaller Fallout nations, is huge. It's huge. If you remember Fallout 3, set in the Capital Wasteland, even if you look at the lore there, the population there is in the low thousands, obviously much smaller geographical area and much more devastated. There are very few people in the Capital Wasteland compared to the population density in some of the major cities of Rio. Most of Rio is here on this side of the Rio Grande, and then there's this elements of Texas, which are part of the Republic, but are full of Texans. And Texas is dominated in this game by the Texas Arms Association, the TAA, and they're sort of at odds with the rest of the Republic of the Rio Grande. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on a navy there. So yeah, the Texans are a bit at odds with the rest of the Republic, but they get their way because most of your arms factories start in Texas. Texas makes the guns for basically the entire Republic. How does the economy work if I'm talking about factories? So you have two types of factories, arms workshops and civilian workshops. You also have Navy dockyards, which are basically arms workshops for the fleet. The idea here is arms workshops produce guns, So you decide what you want to produce from all the things you've researched. If I want squad automatic weapons, you allocate how many factories you want working on that. And steadily over time, they become more and more efficient as that production line ramps up. Civilian factories, meanwhile, are used to build more factories, or they're used to build infrastructure, civilian stuff, and we'll go through that as we go through the game. And naval facilities are used to produce ships. And in this game, ships at the start of the game means do you want triremes, longboats, or canoes? We're not rocking high technology levels at the start of a Fallout game. So that's how the economy works. So factories are fed by resources. Resources are produced in province. So in Fallout, you've got water, energy, scrap metal. You've got composite materials. You've got circuitry, which is rare, and then even rarer is the advanced components, which are basically salvage components of pre-war tech, unless you're producing small numbers yourself. Instantly, you'll see that the robots in Tlaloc in particular is producing huge sums of very advanced resources from their surviving pre-war bunkers and facilities. Us, not so much. We got some steel, we got some metal, we got some basic resources, but you can't really run an advanced economy without access to these sort of resources down here. You can trade for these, but it gets increasingly expensive. You spend civilian factories on that. Final concept I'll cover before I start cleaning up the nation is research. There's a Fallout unique research tree that we can probably have a quick look at. So you've got, these are infantry technologies, so you're researching different sorts of weaponry, training, armor technologies in different tiers. If you're a tribal nation, you stop researching here. Civilized, you can't go past here. The few advanced nations in the game can't go past here, and there's some unique technologies that you need even other fields to grab. For example, I think you need to be to get the APA, you need to be the Enclave, I think. And that's in the Enclave mod. I'm not sure who gets APA in the basic set. Support weapons, so instead of artillery pieces and howitzers and things like that, it's do you want light machine guns, heavy lasers, flamers, grenades, do you want trained dogs, that kind of stuff. Vehicles is motorized, mechanized, so at the top tier you can actually make pre-war APCs and tanks, but you need to be an advanced nation to get there. Heck, you need to be an advanced nation to get Shermans. Otherwise, you can just do up-armored bulldozers. Robotics speaks for itself. Completely revamped land doctrine T, which is what tactics and how your army is organised. Specialised doctrines govern air warfare, naval warfare, and special forces conflicts. There's special forces in the game. There's an air research tree, which is actually quite extensive. It includes the famous Fallout blimps down the bottom. Quite a few uniques, including the vertibirds for the Brotherhood. And then fighters, CAS planes, heavy bombers, cargo planes. Ship designs, all the way up to torpedo boats and whatnot. Modules to go on them. Obviously, the artwork's not completed for all of them because Navy was revamped relatively recently. The industrial tree and the engineering tree. And then there's some reward technologies, which is just a tab which is used to keep track of unique buffs that individual nations might have. So, what you'll normally want to do at game start is pick a national focus, which is from your tree, these are where your nation, basically its storyline and its major choices. It's how how the game guides you and how you guide your nation in terms of the overall strategy it wants to follow. And Rio has a huge tree, which we'll go through as we play. You want to pick a national focus, pick some research, and you'll want to get your troops organised. So army organisation is important in Hearts of Iron 4 for those of you who have played it. You generally want your units organised in a group under a general, then you put a field marshal over them. We don't start with a field marshal, and we start with no ability to promote one, so we don't need one. And then you can assign them to a front line wherever you need them. So if I was to click on this space with Tlaloc Khan, all those troops would move and automatically disperse along the border with Tlaloc. That's an introduction to the concepts. What I'm going to do now is set up Rio the way I like it, and then we'll go through some of the initial background events and my opening strategy for the Republic of the Rio Grande as a demonstration of how I like to play the game. Okay, we're back. So what I'm doing to start with is I'm opening with a bunch of industrial technologies, industry planning, construction basics, organised agriculture tools. So this doesn't mean that no one in the nation knows how to build a thatch hut or knows how organised agriculture works. It's more about disseminating that knowledge across your nation. I've started producing I've changed it from producing crappy pipe guns to these 5.56mm bolt actions. I'm also producing a few anti-tank rifles, a couple of makeshift saws, so pipe machine guns basically, because I can't produce actual machine guns yet, because my units start with some in some cases, and support equipment, so all the gear your troops need to go to war basically. And for ships, rather than producing in combat ships, I'm producing a bunch of convoys. The reason is you can't do naval invasions in this game without convoys, which are like supply barges, and I include a naval invasion in my preferred opening, or at least the opening that I'm going to be trying today. So all my troops are organised, redeploying. We're going to go from there. That phone call. So for now, for those of you who are interested, let's crunch through some lore. And I understand this won't be for everyone, but hey, it's a nice little break. Before recording this, I did record 2 Dominions videos, which I'll be releasing in short order. But for now, let's do some Fallout. It could be worse. I could be doing Equestria War or something. So yeah, 2051, the US occupied Mexico. The argument was political instability, environmental impact, protection of American citizens, so all that sort of stuff. But the reality was it was a resource promoted one. They recognised Rio Grande to increase stability in the region. In truth, that infrastructure was almost exclusively military-oriented, designed to create inroads into Mexico, developed enough to support mass deployment and long-term supply chains, which is smart, right? Develop a relatively stable area which can serve as your base for deployments further into a hostile zone. Basically extended the American border from closer to the guts of Mexico and allowed them to operate more closely in that sort of area. The capital of the newly formed republic was arbitrarily chosen to be Piedras Negras, so Gloria on our map. The leadership was handpicked by occupying forces, so collaborators. Americans provided capital with its own executive, judiciary, and legislative buildings. During the 24 years before the war, what did the Americans focus their efforts on most? So, every nation in this mod, for them, even the generic ones, has a series of decisions which double as the backstory for your nation, but they also all give you choices which allow you to pick and design elements of your nation so that every time you play, you can do something a little bit different. So, for example, this first choice gets us to decide what did America invest mostly in Rio before the Great War. And we can pick either military industry, which gives us 500 guns, 2 arms workshops, and 2 slots for those workshops in our capital, or we can add infrastructure to pretty much every province in Rio, which in some ways is a good deal. Oh, more phone calls. Yeah, so infrastructure, this is worth more. So if you were to produce this yourself, it takes more civilian industry to produce this than it does to produce 2 arms workshops. However, getting 2 arms workshops immediately means you get the productive value of all those arms workshops. And one of Rio's great problems is that it starts with 15 civilian and 9 arms workshops, and most of the arms workshops are in Texas. So getting more arms workshops going in your capital reduces your reliance on Texas for arms production, which can only be a good thing, and it lets you get more guns out soon. Also, 500 guns straight away. We're currently producing less than 1 a day. So this is more than a year worth of our current firearms production. And we need 674 guns just to give the people who we currently have in the field firearms. So I'm going to go with military industry. Give us 500 basic weapons. We're going to say the Americans mostly focused on building, military industry. Some of that survived the war and we've repurposed it. We'll click forward. Oh, it says free military factories. So we're just going to tap up I think what we're going to do I think we're just going to produce as many ordinary firearms as possible because we'll want to produce more units that have only basic infantry in them. This is our introduction to politics. So we are one of the few in a wasteland full of dictatorships, tribals, religious technology cults. We're a democracy. We're an actual bloody democracy. We won't look at that. So there are 4 parties. There are 4 main parties in Rio, and there are 3 ways of thinking about the politics. There's what the people support, so there are 4 parties. Dante Guerra's party. There's the Initiative, led by Valentina Rosado. There's the Texas Interests Coalition, which is the Texans, and the Movement, led by Leonardo Mora. But if you open up here, you actually see your congressional breakdown, color-coded by which of the viable candidates they support. So Dante Guerra is the current president, Leonardo Mora is a previous president, and Valentina Rosado is new on the political scene and is the least popular candidate at game start. And you have them both senators and deputies. This would be, the American term would be congressmen and senators. For the three Australians, I presume, who watch me, senators and members of the House. So, Senate support is important because senators basically dictate who the president is. It's not a direct election. So when a term is up, the senators select the next president from the three candidates. Deputies are important for passing law. They pass the agendas of whoever happens to be president. And you can choose, when you're playing Rio, which of these three candidates you want to favour. And it influences which focus tree you go down because they're all unique. If you pick Dante Guerra, the current president, you end up going down his focus tree. And I'm going to close this for a moment, which is all about producing a stronger Rio, which is in alliance with its neighbours. So it allying with the nations of northern Mexico, and then fighting Caesar's Legion. Dante Guerra hates Caesar's Legion. He hates them with an absolute passion. And all of this is about building an alliance and fighting Caesar's Legion. Leonardo Mora is a bloody good general. And when the Legion, we'll see this later, when the Legion attacked Rio 20 years ago, he smashed them with a massively inferior force. And then he got voted out because he's a massive warmonger. Leonardo Mora wants to restore the old nation of Mexico. And considering most people in Rio, one, don't want a whole bunch of wars, and two, consider themselves Rio citizens first and have not much attachment to this whole pre-war Mexico idea, he was voted out after he had won. So it's sort of a Churchill post-war situation, only he was actually super militarily competent, whereas Churchill made some gaffes. Australia is probably never going to forgive the Gallipoli thing in the First War when he was Sea Lord, for example. Anyway, Mora takes you down a chain where you militarize, you produce a very, very effective military, and then you rebirth the state of Mexico. Mexico reborn, and then you start expanding like crazy to basically eat as much as possible of the former Mexican nation and reunite it, if at all possible. Your initial focus is on wars in the north, and then eventually you go south and you push towards Mexico City itself, which is a long way away. The third candidate is Valentina Rosado. Valentina Rosado is a technological visionary, I guess you could say. She was previously aligned with the Brotherhood of Steel. She's a modernizer. She's come from nothing. She's incredibly intelligent. She used to manufacture robots. She helped the Brotherhood in Texas, so she has very good Brotherhood connections. And she is about modernizing the crap out of Rio, introducing old world technologies and pushing the boundaries of what science can accomplish. In this playthrough, like in the text I want to write, I'm leaning towards doing a Rosado playthrough, but we'll see. So that's the political system of Rio. Interesting for technically a war game, especially a post-apocalyptic one, to be worried about, democratic processes and how you win people over. And when it gets time to campaign, as it will, I'll show you how the campaigning system works too. This is an introduction to Armageddon Station, which is another one of the functions. So let's put this off to the side for a moment. So down here, where is it? Here it is. Armageddon Station. So Armageddon Station was the pre-war control hub of all United States military forces in Mexico. It's a massive bunker. So yeah, it was designed before the Great War as a backup to American control in the event of nuclear war. Contains manufacturing facilities, equipment, resources, rooms full of powered armor, laser rifles, Gex, which is the Garden of Eden creation kit, construction equipment. Problem, nobody can get in. So Armageddon Station is locked. It was supposed to always be occupied, so the people inside could let other people in, but American soldiers there deserted when the bombs began to fall, so they all went and found their families and hid rather than staying alone in the bunker, or staying still and launching their missiles. Anyone who wants to enter needs the 4 keys scattered across Mexico. So Tlaloc received 1, a gift from the United States Army. So Tlalocan holds 1 key. Rio president had 1, as did the military official who held Rio together in the aftermath of the war. So Rio starts with 2 keys. And then Santa Ana over here has 1 key. If you can capture all 4 keys, as any nation with the appropriate tree, so Santa Ana definitely has a tree, Rio Grande definitely has a tree, I'm not sure who else does, then you can open Armageddon Station. We start with the keys named Hunger and War, Tlaloc holds Death, and Santa Ana holds Plague, because they're named after the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So that's a cool little treasure chest that you can't get your way into at the start of the game. Nuclear rain. So the Great War came without warning and left everything in a state of disarray. Mexico was hit later than its northern neighbour, giving just enough time for paranoia riding and the destruction of the chain of command. So, as the nukes started falling in North America, Mexico knew it would be next, and Rio knew that even though it was a low priority target, it would be sandwiched eventually. Now, there's a whole bunch of bunkers in Rio that were designed to protect American military hardware in case of war. Now, the colonel in charge, not getting orders from Armageddon Station because the people there had buggered off, instead of following his orders and putting military hardware in his bunkers, shoved as many civilians as he possibly could into those bunkers, and in so doing, saved a huge number of lives. So the military gathered as many people as they could, sealed the doors, and waited. This choice, however, is about at the last moment before the bunkers closed, some Mexican soldiers landed a transport and managed to find refuge in Rio, because Rio was better equipped to survive than large parts of Mexico. You get to decide what did those men bring, and you get to choose between an army experience gain and a bonus which reduces your supply consumption and gives you bonus attack and defense on core territory. I'm going to choose that. And if you care about the lore, like I said, I'll be writing. I'm not sure how long the piece will be, but first 2 chapters are already up, covering this sort of world. Next event's going to be Reclaiming the Republic. Oh, look, one of our generals is sick. I don't care. Unimportant. Meanwhile, I'm just going to check one thing. I need more political power. So you need political power, which is ticking up here in order to justify wars. As soon as I have enough, I usually like to justify Almas Grandes for reasons I'll talk about later. Reclaiming the Republic, democratic apocalypse. So 3 decades after the Great War, the colonel who led everyone into the bunkers had basically declared martial law and was holding it all together. And when he was dying, instead of handing it over to a successor, he restored the pre-war Rio state. He organised elections, prepared free and fair elections under like post-apocalyptic conditions. And a person called Julieta Torres was elected as the president. Platform was reclaiming borders, and she reconquered large amounts of territory. So most of what Rio's borders now are were reconquered during those years. She couldn't go further south because of Tlaloc. She couldn't go further east at the time because of the river. Texas was sort of by agreement and slowly purchased. And over in the west, you've got these problems over here. So, and the west had a great desert across which no invader could hope to prevail. So, what did she focus on in her second 8-year term? Now, you can choose between repairing the production of metal in the southwest, which gives you 20 metal production, which is really big. Like, you'll start the game producing 76, you can bring that up to 96, or you can get a civilian workshop, a building slot, and 2,000 manpower, which is a lot of manpower, which represents the extra population growth from the fact that she restored the city earlier, there were places to live, so people were drawn in. I'm going to take the metal. And finally is what happened when Caesar attacked the Republic of the Rio Grande. Here we are. Alright. You can stop and read that if you want to, but basically the Legion up here thought that sending an expedition to Rio would be a slam dunk. It was a democracy, it was weak, hadn't really been at war for a while. So they sent a really arrogant asshole who declared he'd never come back until he'd looted Rio. They sent him, he outnumbered Rio massively. Leonardo Mora basically pulled together a scratch coalition like of gangers, cartels, militia, regular soldiers, pulled them together, and then you get to choose. Did he ambush them between the rocky crags, or did he launch a night attack? And I like the night attack because reconnaissance is always good, and improving your attack at night well, a lot of your fighting is going to happen at night, so I like that. Uneven terrain is also very good, however, because the war messed up a lot of terrain, and also Mexico's pretty rough to begin with, so a lot of your terrain is rough, but I like the recon combination. You then are free to pursue whichever ring you like. There's the military modernization tree, so Navy, Air Force, Army, and there's the civilian build-up tree. I start with the civilian build-up tree, which gives you research bonus to industry, which represents the government putting in subsidies to industrial production. Always a good choice to build up your economy. And meanwhile, we can keep an eye on... So meanwhile, Tlaloc has done his origin tree, and his tree is basically based on putting his, as it says, putting his affairs in order, and then eventually he moves on to the final quarter, gives away gifts to people that he can choose to, and then signs his last will and testament before he dies. Organised agriculture is done, so let's produce seed selection for that monthly population growth, because I'm a humanitarian at heart and I want lots of people in my post-apocalyptic state. Desert Rangers declared war on the Vipers, and we did industrial subsidies. So, Desert Rangers are up here, declared war on the Vipers here. So, Rangers will usually defeat the Vipers early on. This is if you played New Vegas, the Rangers at that point have joined the NCR. In this game, this predates that treaty, so the Rangers eventually get to pick which path they go down. There's 3 potential leaders for the Ranger General. One takes them into the historical path, which is NCR unification, the Ranger Unification Treaty. There's Vargas, who leads them down sort of this independent tree, where they are their own thing. And then there's this guy down here who leads them into the Steel Rangers path, where the Rangers actually align with the Brotherhood of Steel. And I haven't put historical focuses on this game, so every nation can pick whatever focus they want. I'm going to establish the Reclamation Bureau because it's something that Rosado would push for. This is the body which goes and finds pre-war locations and puts them to good use. It was abolished a while back because Rio had other problems to deal with, but it improves construction speed on a whole bunch of things. And unlock some good focuses after it. We've unlocked a whole bunch of additional technology. As I race through here. Here, there are lots of branches in the Fallout tech tree where you can choose between quick wins. So if you're a tribal, you can probably go down this scavenge tool path, which gives you lots of bonuses really quickly. But there's no text in Civilized or Advanced. Now, if you're stuck in tribal, that's probably a good deal. Just scavenge your tools, right? Become really good at finding them. Quadrant searching is your final tech because it lets you find more pre-war tools. This pathway is about producing your own tools. It's slower, it's more expensive, but there's more to go. So we're going to start with improvised tools. And we're over here, we're going to get some research speed from respreading the knowledge of Ohm's law and how electronics work. Meanwhile, let's have a quick check. So we've almost got enough guns for all of our men. So we're getting to the point where we actually have enough firearms for troops that we have in the field, which is a good thing. We should be able to justify a war goal now. We can. In fact, I probably could have justified this earlier. Doesn't really matter. We're going to justify that. So that's going to finish December 75. So in December, we're in a position to go to war. And for that reason, I am going to hit a unit. Now, they'll only train once we get more guns, but may as well put someone in the queue. So, Las Grañas. They start an interesting situation. They're just a generic settler nation, but later on in the game, they tend to be eaten up by the cartel and reinforce this. If the cartel's not killed, it can produce this really powerful organized crime syndicate in the northwest. But it starts really weak in terms of troops, but it has quite a significant factory base. They have somewhere between 18 and 19 factories, which is more than half of what we have. It's 2/3 of what we have in terms of factories, but a much smaller army. And what this means is the logical choice is to beat them up and take their stuff before they can use their factories to mobilize more troops. So I'm kind of annoyed that I didn't attack them earlier. I wasn't paying enough attention, but you might. Hopefully, we're still in a position to be able to storm across these river crossings and take them. And the reason I'm producing all these convoys is because I want to be able to land divisions here to bypass these river crossings and stage an encirclement. And I'm going to do that using my Special Forces unit. So, research options here. So, Reclamation Bureau splits, housing research, civilian workshop or arms workshop, and then even more civilian workshops or even more arms workshops. And because I'm going for an early war, I'm going to grab the arms workshops. Even though civilian workshops are generally what I focus on above all, because you can use your civvies to build more civvies. At this point, we're just going to save political power, because when we go to war, we'll be able to change our laws to reflect that, but we're going to need political power in order to do it. So now, we're just going to go into sort of development mode and hope that Las Grañas doesn't build up too much before our justification finishes and we can go to war. One way you can make this even faster, as well as just paying attention, is that if you reclaim the Rio Grande, you can cut justify war goal time by 10%. And after Mexican arms, I may do that, because that's how important getting this war off quickly is. So that is almost done. That'll give us another arms workshop to produce even more guns, which we need. Okay, reclaim the Rio Grande. Another arms factory. You'll see it's gone into more of a deficit. The reason it's going into more of a deficit is because I'm training new units, which means my requirement for firearms goes up. You can see Las Grañas is training new units, so they're up to 6 or 7. They've turned some of their manpower in, and they'll be producing units as fast as they can. The AI is not dumb. It sees this build up and knows. I'm going to set my orders, just a general offensive line, so that I get a planning bonus when I go to war. So the more time your generals know what you're going to be doing, they have time to plan. Meanwhile, the other big political happening. So the story is the Texans are growing, have a lot of power over the rest of Rio, because they control most of the arms factories. They're very wealthy because they produce and sell arms, and arms are very valuable in the post-war world. And they're using that funding in order to basically buy off and influence political campaigns in the rest of Rio, subverting the democratic process, or influencing, depending on your opinion on whether or not that's a good thing or not. Anyway, Dante Guerra thinks it's a crap thing, and he goes to ban political donations to people other than the seat you live in. So if you live in Gloria, that's fine. You can donate to anyone who's competing politically in Gloria, but you can't donate to the campaign of a senator not running for your state or a congressman not running for your seat, because you don't have an interest in that. You have an interest in your local representation, is his argument. Really just an excuse to break the power of the TAA. So we get a little bit less stability, and we gain a bunch of political power, which we will use, which will be very useful. And if you wanted to justify a war but spend some early, that would be where you get it from. Let us get some factory efficiency. Rio's got good research speed as a general rule, and 4 research slots is very solid for a post-apocalyptic nation, so you'll find that you modernize relatively quickly. This represents the influence that ever since Rosado came to Rio, the push for modernization has been quite heavy, and that is represented by the number of research slots you get. Going up to 10 factories now producing basic weaponry, which is great. You can see we've already filled up most of what we need. I'm using these units here at the moment because they don't require anything other than just guns. It's just a bunch of dudes with guns. And because I'm not producing much of anything else, I figured that's what I should do. The question is, at this point, do I produce a civilian workshop, or do I just keep producing more arms factories? I think I'm going to produce 1 civvy, because I will need to trade for stuff if I keep producing arms factories. We are going pretty alright with getting our industry up to date. Let's get basic militia training. Okay, Washington Brotherhood. So Washington Brotherhood up here, they're the evil Brotherhood of Steel. They've conquered one nation, and it looks like they're already attacking another. So who are they at war with? Yeah, they're at war with these guys here, the Settlers of the Cause. Just a settler nation. Mentioned in some of the lore. Yeah, Washington Brotherhood's eating them. And they usually eat them because power armor is greater than pipe guns. Anyone who played Fallout 4 and picked a fight with the Brotherhood early game knows what I mean. Alright, so we finished Reclaim the Rio Grande. Do we now want a civvy, or do we want to race for even more arms workshops? Tough choice. I think that we'll grab a civvy and then the army factories. And our new reclaiming war goal time should be more reasonable as a result of the focus we just took. So we'll teach everyone how to make huts if they don't already have a pre-war area to squat in, and we'll grab a combat language. Combat language, to be honest, could be whatever the local language isn't, right? So Rio is a multilingual nation. They speak English and Spanish. So if the settlers up in Las Grañas don't speak English, then you imagine that English could be your combat language. It's not like people are going to be decoding it. Won't do any of this for the moment. I could pop an advisor or something like that, but really I think the best approach is going to be to save it for the war, depending on how much we're going to have at the time. Expected to finish 29 December. So we didn't get a bonus on that, which is unfortunate. And they are building up troops, but we are building up troops too. And we have more manpower and more factories than them, so our build-up should go harder. But it's easy to hold these river crossings, which is why I pin so much of my hope on getting behind them. Good. I might pop, because he gives me a discount on when I modernize my economy laws. So I think I'm going to have more political focus by then, so I'll do that. Alright, so I'll pop a save here. How about we come back when I've jumped forward a bit and I'm ready for the next interesting step. Alright, well this is helpful and not helpful. So Guerra has now banned gun trade with the Legion. As a result, we've confiscated a bunch of guns that were going to go to the Legion, but we lose even more stability, and Caesar's Legion hates us. Now, Caesar's Legion is huge. They start with between 29 and 52 units. Their units are not small either. They have lots of manpower in them. They have a huge manpower reserve, and while they have significantly more civilian factories, they have many, many more military factories than us. So they can produce a lot of bloody machetes. And later on, if you give Caesar's Legion time to modernize, they can be very problematic. So, yeah, pissing them off, not great, but I understand at the same time, you don't want to piss them off, but you also don't want to sell them guns, right? And the Washington Brotherhood is annexed another state. Great. So they're clearly taking more of their military focuses early on. Not great for the rest of the wasteland, but we're a long way from Canada here in Mexico. So I'm not too worried about that. How are we going? Original Designs is finished. There we are. And we'll go a 308 for every man. 2 arms workshops. Guerra wants to give everyone a rifle. We will face the Legion with the burnished row of steel. Which is a fair way to, if you're going to confront the Legion, I would do it with as many rifles as you can get. So our first units that have finished training, I'm giving them the time to train up to their maximum level. First unit has redeployed. We're going to give him to this unit here, and he'll redeploy accordingly. I've only scripted 1 attack across here. The rest I'll have to do manually. Let's research gliders, because eventually I want aircraft. And industry is all still ahead of time, except for resource gain efficiency, which we will definitely need. So let's grab that now. Normally I'd be researching military doctrine, which is how your army governs itself, except for the fact that I think I might want to swap military doctrine. And if I want to swap military doctrine, then it's in my interest to, well, not research one I'm going to abandon. I'm going to transfer one of my units over here because I think yep, okay, so the TAA is getting pissed because we raided a warehouse of guns that were going to go to the Legion, and people were killed. Great. Awesome. How many convoys do we have reserved? Enough. And in preparation, I am going to move my navy over here. My navy, by the way, consists of 4 canoes and a longboat. But I still think it's bigger than their navy. 308 for every man. More guns. More guns. And get me some more civilian workshops. Okay, so around about October, you get shit on if you're playing Rio. So what happens here is, we'll just read it. October 2275 remembers the Republic's history as the Day of the Dead, the day Gloria burned, the day it smelled of ash and burning fat. The TAA, so the Texans, set off a series of bombs at key locations across the Republic, including in the Capitol, in the Congress, in munitions depots, at bridges connecting Texas and Mexico. Even as Guerra tried to organise relief efforts, he learned the TAA had declared independence in a gunsmith estate to the northeast. The secession by the TAA was a near-fatal blow to Rio. With its capital ablaze, its munitions factories across a river in a hostile country, the nation's army was on the verge of collapse, even as the Legion was raiding its borders. To solve the crisis, Rio's leaders would need to handle both the TAA and the Legion remnants at their borders. And you get a debuff from hell. Recruitable population down, stability down, war support down, construction speed down by 40%. You release this area as an independent nation. And you gain the national spirit Texas Secessionists, which lowers your mobilization speed, population, you increase the supply consumption, lowers recovery, decreases war support, lowers stability, and 1,000 people leave your military manpower pool. So Dios mío indeed, Gloria in flames, and TAA secedes. Texas is led by Todd Howitzer. Resemblance to any person's real or imagined is entirely coincidental on the part of the modern makers. Hasn't updated here yet, but they get some troops, and in a moment he'll get all of our factories. Texas was also quite populated, so they took about 25%, of our population went with them, which sucks, which really sucks. And it's why before I start dealing with the TAA, I like to have been preparing to deal with these guys over here. And unfortunately, I wasn't quite quick enough on the draw this time. Normally, I'd be going to war about this point. In reality, we're going to have to wait about another 60 days. So as soon as we complete Gloria Road, you can start doing focuses which cover your recovery, essentially, as a nation after the TAA secedes. So we've built that. Now we get to pick. This is where you pick your leader. Who's going to step in? Rio's been highly damaged. The Texans have seceded. You haven't gotten any military victories at the moment. Do you stick with Guerra because he's the one who was standing up to the TAA? He's the current president. Or do you blame him? Do you reckon it's his fault that this all happened, and as a result you should go with someone new? And if you do go with someone new, should you go with the Da Vinci of War, Leonardo Mora? Or should you go with the progressive, the technological progressive, who isn't so big on this whole tradition thing and is more about modernization? So, I don't know. I think I'm going to leave it there. We'll take some commentary, and I'll pick my leader, and we'll pick it up next time. That'll probably include our first war and how Rio responds to its initial challenges. So that was an introduction to the Fallout mod for HOI4. Hope you enjoyed it. If there's any other mods or games you want me to have a look at, pop them in the comments. Mostly I like to stick to Dominions. It's my bread and butter. And I've still got a lot to learn in that game, but I'm happy to cover other things from time to time when I have the time. So cheers, thanks for watching.